Presenter for this session right now is Marina Dawson, and the title of the presentation is Pandemic Puppies, a Cultural Analysis of the COVID-19 Dog Craze. So take it away, Marina.
Thank you so much, Robin. Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here speaking with you today. Before I begin, I just want to briefly acknowledge that I am speaking to you today from the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation, and I want to thank them for the privilege of living and working on their beautiful, beautiful land. So I know it's the end of the day today. I'm going to do my best to get this presentation, keep it interesting, and at the very least, know that it's full of puppy spam. So at least you'll end your day with a whole bunch of adorable puppies. So you might remember that as COVID-19 lockdowns came into force across many parts of the world in 2020, shortages in supply chains caused a run on certain products. So toilet paper, hand sanitizer, disinfectant wipes. But another stampede for quote-unquote product occurred, with a pandemic puppy boom starting in the spring and showing few signs of stopping even now. However, a cultural analysis reveals that the conditions were already in place in Western culture for such an event, particularly due to a long history of pet keeping that became amplified during the COVID-19 lockdowns into an intense puppy love effect. Thus, the COVID-19 pandemic is a useful lens for us to consider the cultural forces driving dog ownership. Doing so situates dogs squarely within Western capitalism, and it reveals the far-reaching consequences that dog ownership has for dogs, humans, and the environment. Now, dogs are humankind's oldest domestic animal companion and have a long and mutualistic history with humans. However, it's important to recognize there is no singular transhistorical dog, and the human definition of dog is actually culturally constructed and is subject to change. Thus, dogs occupy a wide range of roles in cultures around the world, including as sources of food, working companions, feral street animals, hazards to human health, and as pampered pets. And the cultural analysis that I'm presenting today is focused on the phenomenon of pet keeping, with a pet being an animal who has no further purpose than to provide companionship to humans. Over the past several decades, many studies have explored why humans keep pets, with an especial focus on identifying tangible mental health benefits to humans. So this has lent some support for the idea that pets can help with depression and anxiety, particularly under stress-prone conditions. Although the research findings might be somewhat inconclusive, the very fact that there is interest in this area of study is an indication of pets' social and cultural importance and reflects that they are increasingly considered a central part of the family. So one theory suggests that pets are sources of non-human social support and that they serve as a shield against psychosocial stress. Anna Marie Vanska writes that pet dogs are often viewed in Western culture as love machines and as a source and mediator of positive emotions. A recent study of people who adopted dogs during the pandemic does add weight to this theory, with many respondents indicating that a notable positive aspect of their time spent with their new dogs was cuddling. Given that in Western culture, dogs are often associated with loyalty, faithfulness, and unconditional love, it may be that for some people, the perceived love and affection given by a dog fills an emotional need that's possibly not met by other humans. So we could hypothesize this as the puppy love effect. In cultural theory, affect can be described as a pre-personal, non-conscious feeling of intensity that drives behavior both at the individual and at the social level. Now, affect hits and captures us as it moves us emotionally in a way that's beyond rationality. And crucially for the human-dog relationship, affect also connects us with other bodies. So these descriptions aptly sum up the immediate physical and emotional reaction that many people have to dogs, especially puppies. Now, given that according to 2018 statistics, there were more than 8.2 million pet dogs in Canada, with 41% of Canadian households at the time keeping at least one pet dog, the puppy love effect was clearly in full force prior to the COVID-19 lockdowns. It can be tempting for us to view a social phenomenon as being surprising or new, when in truth, it's a conjuncture that has developed out of a long and complex cultural history. So Stuart Hall's definition of conjunctural moments as histories of the present helps us to account for how COVID-19 lockdowns created conditions where people craved the social and emotional benefits that pet dogs are culturally perceived to provide. With pandemic lockdowns creating a dominant mode of effect that included loneliness, a need for touch, and boredom, dogs became culturally positioned to fill this void. Ultimately, this is translated into an effective intensity, driving a consumer craze that reveals pet dogs' historical situation within Western capitalism. Now, pet keeping, at least in European history, has been intimately linked with economic prosperity, with the keeping of lap dogs trickling down from the upper classes to the middle classes in the 19th century. In fact, according to Vanska, again, the human-dog relationship has been intertwined with capitalism from the very beginning. Pet dogs are considered property within the system of capitalism, leading to dogs being considered products that can be obtained or disposed of as easily as any other commodity. Recent cultural research in Marxist theory has explored whether the potentiality of affirmative feelings such as love or desire could, within capitalism, change the world. However, questions do remain as to whether capitalism in effect can truly be transgressive. Lauren Berlant's suggestion that love is not entirely ethical, as in both love and capitalism, greed is good, is helpful when considering where pet dogs sit within a capitalist society. So the love that is expected from and shared with pet dogs can be very human-centered and enormously greedy, leading even well-intentioned people to enter the human-dog relationship with little critical thought or reflexivity. Regardless of whether they are considered family members, when pets are bought and sold within a capitalist system, consumers expect to be able to purchase one whenever the desire strikes, much like any other product. Now, this dynamic can be illustrated by looking at how pets have been obtained during the pandemic. And while Canadian animal shelters have seen a 20 to 60% increase in fostering and adoptions at the height of the pandemic lockdowns, and with a continued increase in year-over-year numbers, there has also been a disturbing increase in the number of puppies purchased from exploitive puppy mills or from backyard breeders. So a United States Kennel Club survey found that thousands of pandemic puppy purchasers missed key red flags in the process of obtaining their puppy, with 27% paying money upfront before seeing the puppy, 42% not seeing the puppy's breeding environment, and 83% not being asked by the breeder about their suitability as owners. Various scams have also targeted desperate puppy purchasers, with the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre seeing 188 animal-related scams reported in the first 4 months of 2020, and that's almost as many as they had entirely in 2019. These figures do raise key questions about how pets are viewed as products by consumers, without necessary concern for how dogs are harmed in the manufacture of puppies. Now, rescuing or adopting a homeless dog is not in itself a pure action operating outside of capitalism or systemic power imbalances. In fact, it can be reflective of the income gap that exists in many capitalist societies. So this isn't to say that people with lower incomes don't keep pet dogs, but that, like in many other areas of life, their experience may be different from those more affluent. During the same period of record adoptions, Humane Canada reports an increase in the accessing of pet food banks. Many pets are surrendered due to lack of pet-friendly rental housing, which also disproportionately impacts lower income households. All of this suggests that a rescued dog is just as embedded in toxic capitalism as a puppy manufactured at a puppy mill. Analyzing the cultural phenomenon of pet dog ownership in Western societies through the lens of COVID-19 offers a unique opportunity to consider its constitutive impurity. So Alexis Shotwell identifies constitutive impurity as the complicity that we all share due to our participation in societal systems that cause suffering. Constitutive impurity is inherent in the human-dog relationship, as the relationship involves humans making decisions on behalf of another living being, who generally cannot clearly articulate their wants and needs. However, there are other aspects of pet dog ownership that are steeped in constitutive impurity and reveal the broad and sometimes contradictory impacts of keeping such large numbers of pet dogs, especially relating to human health and climate change during a global pandemic. While there has been no evidence of human transmission of COVID-19 coming from dogs, it is important to note that dogs share the greatest number of pathogens with humans. Zoonotic disease remains a key contributor in the rise of infectious disease in humans, including from domestic animals who can be home to pathogens that make people sick. Considering the sheer numbers of pet dogs living in dense quarters and within close proximity to humans, including in urban centers, it becomes clear that this poses certain risks for humans and dogs. If COVID-19, for instance, had been transmissible from dogs to humans, it would have led to high costs and considerable public health risks, not to mention the potential for millions of dogs to be abandoned or killed. However, the health implications are not simply those of risk, as dogs do contribute positively to human medical outcomes, both in mental health, for instance, and in the scent detection of disease, including COVID-19. Considering the ethical dilemma of how pet dogs are fed is another important case in constitutive impurity, and one that has implications for both climate change and zoonotic disease. Feeding a meat-based diet to pet dogs requires either intensive farming or over-harvesting of wild animals, particularly fish. Dr. Aaron Bernstein ties COVID-19 and climate change together, including from intensive farming and biodiversity loss. So we can't ignore the contribution to this that comes from feeding dogs, especially when there's a large upswell in dog ownership during both a global pandemic and a climate change crisis. So the question becomes, after acknowledging the complexities involved in our relationship with pet dogs, how can we move forward into a better future together? So the One Health framework is a promising approach to research that can be helpful in this area. One Health recognizes that human, animal, plant, and environmental well-being are inextricably linked and cannot be understood or managed in isolation. So it also brings the environment into consideration. It can be useful to think about the framework as a square that balances human, animal, plant, and the broader environment on each corner. It must be emphasized that in One Health, the focus is generally on the reciprocal relationship between humans and non-human animals. This returns agency to animals and recenters the equation to be more balanced on both sides. One Health can also be used to explore how broad issues such as poverty or household violence impact health outcomes and well-being for both humans and their pets. In the case of pet dogs, this recentering of the equation to consider dogs' health and well-being alongside that of humans is indicative of an attempt to resituate dogs within Western culture and capitalism. And finally, One Health acknowledges constitutive impurity by recognizing the ambiguous and conflicted nature of the human-animal relationship and the impact that these relationships have on animals themselves, on humans, and on the broader environment. So if we return now to Stuart Hall's theory of conjuncture, it is important to note that Hall saw that a conjuncture was both a moment of danger, but also one of opportunity. In this case, the intensified puppy love effect during COVID-19 lockdowns could be an opportunity for us to transform the human-dog relationship, with more people experiencing puppy love and with the social and emotional benefits that pet dogs bring to humans being more widely acknowledged and appreciated. However, one key problem preventing us from moving forward into this new opportunity is that within the dominant system of capitalism, dogs are problematically considered products or property. So the pandemic conjuncture has revealed this complicated place that dogs occupy in capitalist society as both fellow beings who can offer love and support, but also as commodities who can be bought, sold, and otherwise kept under the control of their human owners. So I hope I've given you all some new things to think about today as you are at home cuddling with your dogs or when you see a dog out walking on the street. I'd like to end my presentation by thanking the organizers and the volunteers of the Graduate Student Research Conference. I know they've put in a lot of hard work over the last few months and have made today just wonderful in terms of a presenting experience. I'd also like to thank Dr. Anita Gervin, whose course prompted this paper, and she provided invaluable feedback and support. So thank you, Anita. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or send me an email if you'd like to chat further about anything. With that, I think, Robin, I'm happy to take questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Marina. And we do have time for questions here. So if anyone has a question, please feel free to enter it in the Q&A tab or to unmute and ask your question. And yes, virtual applause for sure. That was a lovely presentation. while I'm waiting for people to input questions, I was going to ask you what drew you to your topic, Marina?
Yes, well, as you probably have noted, I'm a huge dog lover myself, and I've long been very interested in the human-dog relationship. Followed animal rights philosophy. So, this idea of bringing culture into play in terms of how we think about and how we talk about our relationship with dogs has long been interesting to me. And just as a bystander, sitting back and watching the craze that happened in the spring of 2020, especially, was just amazing. I mean, seeing my friends in the rescue community just overrun with applications to adopt, and the amount of interest that was out there was just fascinating to me. And so this was just such a great opportunity to kind of dig into it a little bit further.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Are there any questions coming in? Awesome. Go ahead, Anita.
First of all, thank you, Marina. That was amazing. I loved seeing. I just have to say again that you brought so many themes from that course together, and the presentation, somehow you packed those all in a way that, at least for me, it felt like it flowed very well. I'm sure other people who aren't familiar with cultural studies might not have connected all the references, but yeah, just that notion of constitutive impurity was really interesting to land on, because as you noted, you are a dog lover, and so it's a really beautiful thing to bring into this thing, because often in critique we have only this, oh man, like I feel guilty for everything I've done or having a pet, or so how to reconcile that. So yeah, I just wanted to ask you, does that notion, or on an everyday level, as a dog lover and owner of dogs, wondering if that kind of thought has shifted. What do you use? What would one use, for example, instead of owner of dog? Would it be a forced language of like, I'm in relation with my dog? How would one think of that in sort of complexity? Does Shotwell or anyone give us sort of everyday language we can use to think about that relationship?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you, Anita, and thanks for coming today to listen to. I appreciate your kind words. So that's an interesting question, because that's something I've grappled with for a long time, and owner is something that always rubs me the wrong way, just personally. But at the same time, you're right, a lot of the other language feels forced. So guardian is a lot of times what I see, and what's out there, and that's kind of almost a sort of lack of a better option at this time. But I think the whole notion of constitutive impurity, I think, is so interesting and brought so much to me in terms of reflection on my relationship with dogs and other animals, because it gave me more of a language to articulate some of the things that make me uncomfortable in the relationships that we have. So, prime example is the whole idea of feeding dogs, which is, a huge can of worms in the dog community of how do you feed your dogs. But I think bringing in a lens of the actual environmental impacts and such that it has. So, I think for anyone looking to dig into these themes a bit more, I found it really interesting with, even on the Athabasca Research Library, when you input One Health or One Welfare to look at what research has been done out there, there's a ton, and it's really interesting, and people are digging into these themes, which is fantastic to see from my perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for your presentation, for taking the time to answer some questions, Marina. I believe we're at the end of the time for this session. There should be an announcement coming out momentarily, so we have a bit of a break now, and then the next session will be on the main stage. So thank you everyone for attending, and a virtual round of applause for Marina, because that lovely
Thank
presentation.
you so much, everyone. Thank you.